Hello guys and welcome back to the channel where today we are discussing Saw. Very much the Marmite horror franchise of cinema. I feel like you definitely either love or hate Saw, and I personally adore it. I think it's one of my favourite franchises of all time, and in the spirit of playing a game, guys, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and like this video in 5 seconds. Let's see what happens if you don't. Nothing, but a lot happens if you do, and it massively helps me out, so thank you very much. So today, we're going to be ranking the Saw series, including all 8 films, from the worst to the best. So, without further ado, let's crack on with this video. Now, coming in at 8th place is the 8th movie, Jigsaw. Now, many Saw fans hate this movie, and I'm not one of them. I think it's fine. I think it's a pretty decent Saw movie, considering they were trying to reinvent the franchise for a modern audience. However, I think as a Saw fan, it does bother me because it doesn't quite fit into the main Saw timeline. And if you watch the other 7, they're very well linked, and there's a lot of things that tie them all together, and this one feels quite standalone, so I understand why Saw fans wouldn't like this one. There is also no returning cast apart from Tobin Bell as Jigsaw, which is a massive shame. However, Tobin Bell as Jigsaw is one of the highlights of this franchise, so I'm so glad they got him back at least. The twist is pretty cool. You know, a lot of people say they saw it coming, but personally, I thought it was a pretty cool twist. However, it was pretty obvious who Saw's new protege was, but I did enjoy this movie regardless. I think I just enjoyed having Saw back. And the traps, I do agree with the criticism. They don't quite feel like traditional John Kramer traps. However, the blender one is quite cool. I do enjoy that one. And, you know, it's decent enough. If you haven't seen any of the Saw movies, I would always say start with the first one. But if you don't want to start there, start with this one, because it's not completely linked and bound down in mythos, and it's not setting up a load of stuff. So it is a good entrance point. In 7th place, rather ironically again, is Saw 7, otherwise known as Saw the Final Chapter or Saw 3D. And I think the fact that they tried to make Saw 3D is a little bit jarring in places, especially when I'm just watching it on my HD TV. It doesn't quite work. You know, there's very odd shots of a saw flying at you or blood flying at the screen, and it does feel a little bit too Hollywood for Saw. It also does feel a bit rushed in places, which is quite frustrating. I know originally they were going to make it a 2-part thing, but there were poor diminishing returns on Saw 6. So they decided to make it one movie, but then this was the highest grossing Saw movie of all time. So it's a bit frustrating in that sense. You know, it does feel like they've gone, we better wrap up this franchise, so let's do it in one movie. The traps are good, and I really like the author plotline in this. The fact that someone's making up the fact that they were a Saw survivor and is profiting on that idea. They're selling books, they're doing interviews, pretending they were a Saw survivor, and they just weren't. That is a real fascinating thing, and something that would quite easily happen in the real world. Again, it's really good to see the returning cast all the way through this. I really like watching the demise of certain characters. I'm trying to not include spoilers, but that's really good, and seeing that bear trap finally work was great. And Hoffman's ending is definitely very fitting, and I like the returning character from early on in the franchise who does that. A lot of people don't. I think it's fine, but again, just a bit rushed. In 6th place is Saw 4. Now, by the end of Saw 3, it kind of feels like the Saw franchise was wrapping up a little bit. So when they brought out Saw 4 and I watched Saw 4, I was quite interested to see how they were going to carry on the storyline, especially now John Kramer wasn't quite as in the picture as he was before. And in all fairness, it does that. It really makes me excited when I watch it for the future of the franchise. You know, it sets up a lot of good stuff while respecting the past. The storyline with Riggs and him being manipulated as a cop is really good. It's not the most memorable part of this movie for me, and to be honest, that is kind of what it holds it back. I don't find his character particularly compelling. However, the journey that he goes on and the stakes that are involved, all the cops in that trap with the ice block and stuff, and the trap involving the paedophile is really good. I really enjoyed those bits, as well as that scalp trap. That is so uncomfortable to watch, and it's really iconic. The autopsy scene at the start is great. You know, it's so realistic. They actually hired a real coroner to be on set at the time so that they made sure that they got it all right. It's horrifyingly realistic, and it it's one of those things that makes you uncomfortable when you watch it. But you're not going into Saw expecting a happy ending or anything like that, are you? So, and seeing Hoffman's rise as well throughout the movie and setting up the new accomplice to Saw is really rewarding to watch, and Hoffman is so great in a horrible way. It's a cracking movie. In 5th place again, rather fittingly, is Saw 5. And one thing I noticed about when I was making notes and ranking these movies, they all sort of, you know, as I started to think about them more, they started to change positions quite a lot. So bear that in mind, you know, a lot of these are quite interchangeable, and there's an argument to be made for each movie to be the best Saw movie in the franchise, I believe. Because this was originally at number 6, and then I actually started to think about how brilliant it was, and it came in at number 5. Like a lot of these movies, they've all changed places from where they were originally. But Saw 5, the group trap, I quite like the group traps, and it follows these people that all have something to do with this event that happened, and you don't find out exactly what that is until the end. And the twist of that if all of them had worked together, maybe they could have survived, you know, but they don't. They choose to work individually, and that is ultimately their demise, is really, really good, and it really makes you think. And I think that's what's so good about the Saw franchise. Every movie has a point to make, and it makes you think. The Strom storyline in this, of him trying to track down Hoffman and work out what's going on, like he's onto him, and Hoffman knows that. So that sort of dog-eat-dog sort of chess playing throughout the film is really good. And watching Hoffman's potential demise wind up in Strom's framing is so clever. It's really good. And I think this movie has, for me, one of the most shocking endings. If you've seen this movie, you know what I'm talking about. But just the way that it handles the ending, and I'm trying not to spoil it, but you know, just watch this movie and you'll understand what I mean. I think it's a cracking ending, and it really makes you go, oh shit, what is going to happen now? Saw 6 is in 4th place for me, and one of the main reasons that this one is so high is because of that insurance plotline. Now, from the UK, I live, and I'm very thankful to live, with free healthcare, the NHS. So when it comes to American healthcare, I find that really fascinating about how that works, and the fact that someone can be denied potentially life-saving treatment because it would cost the insurance company more than it's worth. I mean, putting a price on someone's life like that is really cruel, and this movie highlights that, you know. Potentially they could have done something to save John Kramer. And watching that insurance guy go through these traps and learn his wrongdoings is really interesting. He goes from someone that you kind of watch and you're like, well, you're a dickhead at the start, to someone that is very, you know, you really feel for him and his character, and by the end of it, you just want him to be all right again. And I think that that's a real testament to why this movie is so good. It takes the character on a real journey. There are other characters in this movie, and you don't really find out what their relationship to the main guy is until the end, and that's quite interesting. Throughout the whole movie, you're thinking, how are they related to him? What have they got to do with this? And I think that that's really good. It keeps you on your toes. You know, there's always a bit of information being withheld from you. The opening scene of this with the fat giving scene, when they have to give body parts, and whoever gives the most amount of their body wins, is one of the most disgusting traps the franchise has ever come up with. And I hate it. It's so vile, but it's so brilliant for a Saw movie. And again, watching Hoffman in his prime and seeing the cops get onto him, like in this, by the end of this movie, they're onto Hoffman. And I think that that is really cool. It's nice to sort of go into the 7th movie thinking, how's Hoffman going to get out of this one? And once again, it delivers with a real great ending. That's something that I think all the Saw movies give. They either have a great twist or a great ending by the end of the film, which leaves you thinking, oh shit. And I like that in a movie. Now, these top 3 were the hardest to rank, and these also changed around the most. So ask me again tomorrow, and they'll probably be in a different place, which is really great when I'm putting this on the internet. However, in 3rd place is the original Saw movie, simply titled Saw. This movie finds the perfect balance of being a self-contained movie while setting up other things for the future of the franchise. When they made this film, when James Wan directed it, you know, he did not expect it to be this phenomenon. They weren't going to make a franchise out of it. It was going to be a standalone movie. And that is really interesting. The fact that it's got 8 sequels and a 9th coming out, you know, next year. they never intended that to happen. So it's a really interesting film that it's self-contained while also setting up potential other stuff. For a lot of the first movie, it follows Dr. Gordon and Lawrence just in this bathroom trap, and it opens and you have no idea what is going on, what is happening. You know, the Saw franchise and the mythos behind this movie isn't so heavy in this one. It's very much focused on those two characters and what they're doing and the mystery as to why they're there, how they're linked, and how they're going to get out of it. So it's a really good, interesting, tense movie when you watch it for the first time especially. It's the least gory out of all of them. That's why I always say if you want to get into Saw, watch the first one because, well, obviously. But, you know, it's not as gory as its reputation, so I definitely think give the first one a chance. It's shocking, its twists and turns are some of the best in the franchise, and it's just an amazing cast with an amazing concept and mystery, and James Wan is one of my favourite directors of all time, and he completely smashes this movie out the park. And this was originally in first place, but when I was ranking these movies earlier, it just missed out because I love the next movie so much. But that is Saw 3 in second place. I think one of the things that holds Saw 3 so high for me is that whole DIY, you know, back alley surgery that John Kramer makes that nurse do on himself. When she's there with just random tools and she's cutting him open to try and keep him alive just a bit longer. It's so uncomfortable to watch. It's so gory, it's grim. And that's why I love it. The concept of this where if John Kramer's heart stops, the machine around the nurse's neck kills her it's so twisted, but it's brilliant. And seeing Amanda being in full swing with John Kramer and being manipulated a little bit by him and thinking that she's in control when really she's not is a very good part of this film. I really like her character. The trap side of the story about a man who lost his son and the court case went wrong and he's so infuriated and taken over by this rage and this sadness that he lost his kid is really, really compelling, and it's very relatable. You know, anyone would feel that anger if they had lost their kid and the court case went wrong. And seeing him come face to face with all these people who are somewhat responsible for it is great. And the trap with the fish hook, oh, it's one of the best traps in the franchise, and just thinking about it is making me really uncomfortable. And again, it ties up the first three movies, but also massively sets up the next lot of the franchise. You know, there's a couple of traps in this and you're like, but they couldn't have got out of that. And that is what sets up the next lot of the franchise. Hoffman's introduced, and you get a sense that even though this is tying up the first three movies, it really is setting up what's coming. Just before I tell you my number one spot, guys, if you haven't worked out already, please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell if you've not, and like the video and comment down below how you would rank the Saw franchise. And are you excited for Spiral, guys, coming out next year? I know I am. But in the top spot, guys, it is Saw 2. And I think one of the reasons that Saw 2 is so good is because you spend the most time with John Kramer, the Jigsaw killer, and you really get a sense of how his mind ticks and how manipulative he is. But also you listen to him, and the scariest thing is you sort of go, actually, he's got a point. He's this massive serial killer guy, and he's got a point. And watching that, it's like, what is wrong with me? Because I don't agree with the guy, but he's making sense, and it's scary how much sense he makes the more you think about it. And Tobin Bell as the Jigsaw killer, you know, John Kramer, literally lightning in a bottle, possibly the best bit of this franchise after the traps and stuff. So, you know, I really hope that he is in Spiral coming out next year. And the whole murder house thing is really, really great. It's a lot of fun to watch. These characters all scrambling around, trying to work out what's gone wrong, why they're in this situation. And Amanda's back in this, and you're like, but she was in the first one, so why is she now back in a trap? And you're trying to figure that out. There's a lot of stuff going on with the cops, who again will set up later movies. And this definitely has some of the most iconic traps in it, you know, like the needle trap, or the needle trap, the thing with the razor blades in the thing. I mean, the characters in this are a little bit stupid, but you have to take that sort of stuff with a grain of salt when it comes to movies like this. It has the best twist in the franchise, and nothing has been able to quite shock me as much and pull the rug out underneath me as much as this movie did when I first watched it and I saw that twist and I was like, oh my God. Don't just go on YouTube and look for the twist. It won't make sense without the rest of the movie, but it's so good. The cops are great. The cast in this, again, are possibly the best in all of the movies. There's so much great stuff in this movie, and it's probably the one that I rewatch the most, and I think it's probably the most famous one also. And that is the video for today, guys. Thank you so much for joining me once again, and thank you so much for your continued support. It really does mean the world, and we're so close to 100 subscribers, which was my milestone for the end of the year, so please help me get there if you haven't already. But until then, guys, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now. Oh, it's cold. Nothing worse.